So, guys, I want to talk about Tony Khan, and I really want to pop the question: is Tony Khan like Vince? Is Tony Khan cruel, or is he thinking like a businessman? And this is in regards to Ricky Starks and the Lucha Bros. And what happened with like the Lucha Bros is that they were planning on going to WWE, but what happened was that one of them got injured. So what happens in certain contracts is that if you are injured for, let's say, like 8 months, and you're still under contract, you're under contract until like January 1st, 2025. There are some promoters that can say, okay, since you were out for 8 months, we're going to add that back to your contract. So you're healthy for 8 months, really, and you're going to be in the company for another 8 months. Or it could be like or somebody can kind of tweak that and be like, okay, instead of 8 months, we're going to do 1.5. So that means, 12 months and other things like that. And sometimes, companies do this for a couple of reasons. I think sometimes companies do this to be vindictive, especially in the professional wrestling companies, because obviously, when you're 20s and in your teenage years, your 20s, your 30s, and early 40s, you're at your prime, really. So it's ultimately to punish wrestlers, to be like, okay, you know what, you're going to stay within the company. If I'm not going to utilize you, you're going to like stay here. And then also the other thing is the Machiavellian reason, which is it sends a message to everybody not being utilized that you can jump ship to a competitor. So, again, if Miro's not being used, but he gets a call from Triple H, really, it's a bad message when Tony Khan says something like, okay, you know what, Miro, you have 2 years left on your contract. So what's going to happen is you're going to go to my competitor and you're going to be booked better. And then people are online are going to blast me for my bad booking of you, so it does make your competitor look better and it makes you look bad. The other thing is that, there are some classic examples in WWE. I think a great example is Kurt Angle, because he felt very burned out and tired and exhausted. And when he wanted to quit and get out of his contract early, Vince McMahon had a huge fit. He was angry. He was furious. And then he calmed down and then he said, okay, then he let him go to TNA Wrestling, So sometimes, even with Vince, there are stories of him, obviously holding people hostage as well. Or you see like that reaction, here's somebody who's worked hard, very committed, done a lot of great things, Kurt Angle, and the first thing that Vince does is show ungratefulness. So you can't really, look at Tony Khan as a bad guy. And then also, like shoe on the other foot, you look at Vince, what happened during the pandemic when people were struggling financially. He let go of a lot of wrestlers, fuck you, see you later. I don't care if you get a job or not, really, So, sometimes I think that, a lot of people try to vilify Tony Khan, and there's things to vilify him for, but also, Vince is kind of like the biggest villain in wrestling, as I say. He's the biggest heel. So you can't really just, so I think that sometimes maybe with Tony Khan, he's almost becoming the Vince McMahon role, with a lot of his choices, and it makes sense, really. He has a lot of issues with how he runs his company. But yeah, you don't want to make your competitor stronger. The other thing, as I said before, is, obviously you look at the long history of Vince McMahon and how he's treated his wrestlers. And I also think that the other big thing is that it's just to punish wrestlers, because sometimes, I think the story about Ricky Starks, if I remember correctly, was earlier this year. There was a post by him or somebody saying that the reason why he did not go to AEW or go back to AEW is because he didn't like the storylines that he was going to be involved in. He wanted to be a heel. They wanted to make him a babyface. And there are plenty of other wrestlers, on the AEW roster or other rosters that have that power, the Hulk Hogan. That doesn't work for me, brother. So why would you want a wrestler like that to go to another company, to go to a competitor? And then also you look at what Ethan Page did. Ethan Page said on NXT, you know what? He made a rip about sitting at home and making money for free and stuff like that. So there's also people like that would rib the companies, that would rib the rival companies, really. So, with all that said, I do want to talk a little bit about it. Do I agree or disagree? I think with the Lucha Bros, it's a hard situation for me. I think that the biggest reason why they don't want them to go to WWE really quickly is because obviously it's a bad look for AEW, because they're synonymous with AEW and they've done a lot of really great stuff, really. So it looks bad that they're in a rival promotion, really. So it's just like, as I said, maybe underutilization, Or as people will say that, okay, when you see Lucha Bros in WWE, they're going to talk to them and you're going to say something like, you're not going to do, Ray Phoenix is not going to do, Canadian destroyers or pile drivers, and he's not going to receive them and keep on going. You're not going to watch Pentagon Jr. I think it was Orange Cassidy versus Pentagon Jr., and they did something like they're exchanging Canadian destroyers. So when you have wrestlers that go to WWE, what happens is that they get re-educated on how to be a professional wrestler. They learn, like, if Will Ospreay went to WWE, they'll say something like, you have great matches, but we're going to work on your match style. You're not going to do something like receive a pile driver on stairs and you're going to go on for another 20, 30 minutes, really. And I think that's going to happen to Lucha Bros. A lot of people will criticize how their matches are in AEW. So one of the reasons why I think Tony doesn't want them to go is because he knows that he's going to be further bashed, because he's booked them in matches where they're doing a lot of just, unrealistic spots. Somebody's getting a Canadian destroyer or somebody's getting a pile driver through a ladder and the match continues for another 20 minutes, with no selling. That's going to be the big thing about the Lucha Bros, because they're big about having matches where they don't sell. But WWE is going to, correct that problem, really. So I think that he's not letting go of them for fear of being criticized. Do I think that that's a rational thing? I think absolutely, really. But I think that Lucha Bros sitting on the sidelines, it hurts AEW a lot. I think that, honestly, he needs to put their asses to work, really. But that's a difficult situation, because they can easily say no, and then you can fire them, and then, what do they do when they're fired, So there should be something in their contract, which is that, if you get fired, sometimes that means you can't compete for another company right away, really. I know there's 90-day no-compete clause. But if it's something like, you're under contract for another year, that should be like, okay, well, you can't compete for another promotion for another year. Not just the 90-day thing. But I think that's what he should do. But I do think not releasing Lucha Bros, it doesn't hurt AEW, because, the Lucha Bros did a good job, but they're not like MJF. They're not like this mega star. They're not like somebody synonymous with AEW, really. So it definitely kind of reads off as, as just wasting money, really. You're paying them to do nothing, really, and you're not really punishing them, and it's not really. And even if they're in WWE, they're almost like the Motor City Machine Guns. Like, people will know them, people will pop, people will be happy for them, but then it's like a month or two later, Lucha Bros are not going to be anything, what's the word? They're not going to be megastars, And then it's also like with Jade Cargill. Jade Cargill's standing out, really, but she's not like this ultra megastar. She's not reached that point, maybe in a couple of years. But yeah, I think that Tony doesn't have anything to worry about feeling embarrassed by the Lucha Bros going to WWE. I think that, would I consider him petty? I would say yes. I think it is a petty situation, but also, as I said, I think long term it's not going to be detrimental. It's going to be more detrimental to people who will just compare the matches and all that stuff. But I really think that in the grand scheme of the Lucha Bros going to WWE, that's not a big polar shift, really. So I do agree that it is pettiness. But as I said, really, I just think that the other big thing that's not petty is Tony has to set an example to everybody, saying that, okay, you're under contract with my company. A lot of you are in the prime of your life, really. So if you want to go over to my competitor, I'm not going to be Ned Flanders and just be like, okay, yeah, that's going to happen, really. I have to create some consequences to be like, okay, you know what? Then, because people know that he's a nice guy, really, so he has to kind of be creating some consequence to be like, okay, it feels like house arrest or detention if you're sitting home for a while, because it's a waste of, it's you wasting yourself, really, so sometimes there is a sense of just being like, okay, well, I'm going to punish you by you not being productive, really, instead of you going to my competitor and being productive and keeping momentum, so I do kind of see both sides to it, but I do think that it kind of aims on being a little bit more petty than anything else, really. When I talk about Ricky Starks, that's just a little bit more controversial. I think with Ricky Starks, he has the potential of being a megastar. I think that, honestly, if he goes to NXT, that's going to be really big for them. I think that the other issue that I'm very, very concerned about with Ricky Starks is that I think if he goes to WWE, he could be another like Austin Theory. He looks a little bit like The Rock. People can kind of joke with him, and then he can be a joke wrestler. The same way people joke with Austin Theory being Vince McMahon's, daddy's boy, like the last daddy's boy of Vince McMahon, type of thing. So I'm not sure how successful Ricky Starks could be, but he does have like the voice, the charisma, a really good like look and all that. I think he would be very successful in WWE. NXT, I think that it would be a fire company if they had Ricky Starks really. So it makes sense for Tony Khan to not allow him to go as soon as possible, really, because again, there's so much potential in Ricky Starks. The other thing is that this helps out Ricky Starks a lot. Really, is that he's lucky that he's not going to Game Changer Wrestling, because you look at a pretty face like that. Imagine if he gets his face cut with barbed wire or exploding tubes or whatever. You don't want to kind of you don't want to kind of fuck up your looks, really. There's a lot of just that Ricky Starks can have, really. So Tony Khan's doing him a big favor, by keeping him out of violent, hardcore death matches, type of thing, really. And then the other part of it is that that there was a story about Ricky Starks, and as I said before, that he did not want to. He does not like their creative, really, and he doesn't like the creative not utilizing him. He wants to be a heel, but he's not like the direction that they've given him, really. So there could be something where, I think right now he should be in the Hurt Syndicate. I think that he would be a really great addition to the Hurt Syndicate. And, being mentored by MVP and Bobby Lashley, and then he can possibly come off as being a little too arrogant or ambitious, and then he gets a beat down for that, and then they ship him off to WWE. That'll be the way to do it. But I think that there's a lot that Ricky Starks could do. I know that he may not like hearing this, but Ricky Starks could be in Ring of Honor, and he could be the Ring of Honor champion. I think that, like I've said, it needs to go from Chris Jericho to Dustin Rhodes, and then to Sammy or Ricky Starks. Really, there's a lot you can do with Ricky Starks. Really, I think that him being at home is to his own detriment. If he's not being utilized or being called up or anything like that, really, that's one thing. If he's not agreeing with creative and just sitting at home because he doesn't like creative decisions, I think that he needs to kind of suck it up a little bit, because I think that there's a lot that he could really do in AEW, and he's not, and he needs to step up to the occasion. You look at someone like Daniel Garcia, who steps up. You look at Jack Perry, who steps up. So I think that he needs to really eat crow. That's my opinion on Ricky Starks. I think that he really needs to advertise himself and show that he's a big deal. And that's going to lead to a lot of great things. He needs to be almost like that Jade Cargill. And Jade Cargill showed that she was a big deal with the TBS championship. And that was that, really, So I really think Ricky Starks, he's proven a lot, but he needs to prove a lot more, really, So I think him sitting at home is to his own detriment, So do I consider Tony petty for that? I would say that, absolutely not. That would be my opinion. I think that you have a wrestler that can work. You have a wrestler that it's alleged that had a disagreement with a storyline and his creative direction, really. So, why would I want to give that wrestler to WWE? And then also, if he gives him to WWE, it makes him look stupid. It's like, okay, look at this another game changer type of wrestler, and we're giving him to WWE on a silver platter, really. So there has to be some form of consequences. And then again, as I said, Ricky Starks is in his 20s, I believe. So again, he's wasting. He's probably going to be wasting, a little bit more, like 13 months, sitting at home, really. So it's a way to just, put him under house arrest, or be like, okay, you know what, like I've said, he could really just do a great job, and he can go to the Australia show, and that'll be a hell of a send off. There's a lot of things that he can really do, and there's a lot of just great decisions that he could be making, really. But I think that, as I said, I think that he needs to kind of reach a negotiation with the direction of AEW. So I really agree with Tony that I think that Ricky Starks has he's paid his dues, but he's paid like 50% of his due. There's a lot more that Ricky Starks can be doing with AEW. So I definitely feel that that with Tony, he's not in the wrong with this. I think that, it's not good to send wrestlers with a lot of potential to your competitors on a silver platter. It's important to kind of make them wait and stuff like that. And then, as I said, if you look at Vince McMahon, you kind of look at some of the things that he's done. There's been wrestlers like Miro who joined AEW. So what did he do? He had Lana go through a table so many times, really. There's also been wrestle. Like as I said, look at what he did to Kurt Angle. The first thing he did was verbally abuse Kurt Angle, then he changed his mind. There are some wrestlers that get a very bad beatdown by other wrestlers for leaving the company. There are some other wrestlers that receive workplace retaliation. So if you look at somebody Dusty Rhodes, who he wanted Dusty Rhodes to be like the Hulk Hogan of WWE, but Dusty said no, really. And then you look at how he gave that gimmick to Dustin, and for a long time there was like this thing about, okay, well Rhodes people, the Rhodes scholars, the Rhodes family, they're not allowed to be the WWF champion because Dusty chose not to be the Hulk Hogan. And then that role and stuff like that. So as I said, there's that hypocrisy of, what, Tony does it. What, we're gonna we're not really going to, when Tony does it, it's a big deal. But we kind of don't look at how Vince did it, or you look at Mickie James. I think that she suffered because what happened was she went to TNA, came to WWE, she went back to TNA, and then they had Piggy James and other things like fat shaming to her. And she's beautiful. She was never fat. So there's also that as well, really. And then you look at all the female wrestlers in WWE who became champion, like Becky Lynch and a few other ones, that when they became champions, they got knocked up, really. So it's almost like it's very selective outrage. Like he doesn't punish them, or he doesn't give them a bad booking after they come back from pregnancy after being the champion of the company. Like, oh, well, I'm champion, I'm headline WrestleMania, there's a huge story, there's months of booking matches I can have, but I got knocked up, really. So it's selective. So I think that when you look at Tony Khan, I think that I would say he's more of a businessman. But ultimately, too, there is that hypocrisy of, if you're going to criticize how he's done things with wrestlers by keeping them on extended contracts, you look at Vince McMahon, where he's done workplace retaliation. He's also done selective workplace retaliation. But it seems like, out of sight, out of mind, and so Tony's in sight, so he's in everybody's mind.